Welcome back to Unveil Matrix, the channel that reveals the hidden narratives of history. Today, we delve into the intricate world of the Afghan Taliban. In the rugged terrains of Afghanistan, a potent force emerged in the shadows of the Soviet-Afghan War that lasted from 1979 to 1989. This force was the Taliban, a group that would go on to shape the destiny of the nation in ways unimaginable. The formation of the Taliban was no overnight phenomenon. It was a process that started in the aftermath of the Soviet invasion, a time of chaos and power vacuum. The seeds of the Taliban were sown in the madrasas or religious schools of neighboring Pakistan, where countless Afghan refugees sought shelter. Here, young minds were steeped in an interpretation of Islam that was strict, uncompromising, and deeply influenced by the Deobandi school of thought. And yet, the story of the Taliban isn't just about religious fervor. It's also about geopolitical maneuvering. In the backdrop, external powers played a significant role in its formation. Pakistan, for instance, saw in the Taliban a chance to secure its western border and extend its influence. Saudi Arabia and the United States too supported the group, seeing it as a bulwark against Iran and a means to secure their interests in the region. At the heart of the Taliban, however, is an ideology. It's an ideology rooted in a desire for order, a return to what they perceive as the purest form of Islam, and a resistance to foreign influence. This ideology, combined with the conditions of the time, gave birth to the Taliban, a group that would go on to have a profound impact on Afghanistan and the world. As we've seen, the Taliban's formation was a complex process influenced by a myriad of factors. Now that we've examined the formation of the Taliban, let's explore their rise to power. The story of the Taliban's ascent is deeply entwined with the volatile history of Afghanistan, particularly the period following the Soviet withdrawal in 1989. Afghanistan, scarred by a decade-long war, was left in a state of profound instability. The power vacuum that ensued after the Soviets' withdrawal was profound and far-reaching. The country was left with a weakened government, fractured by internal divisions and crippled by the ravages of war. This instability led to a brutal and prolonged civil war, as various factions vied for control. In the midst of this chaos, the Taliban emerged as a new force. They promised stability and security, a message that resonated deeply with a population weary of conflict and uncertainty. The Taliban, a group of religious students, capitalized on the desperation of the Afghan people. Their promises of peace, order, and strict adherence to Islamic law attracted widespread support in a nation longing for calm. By the year 1996, the Taliban had managed to seize control of Kabul, the capital city of Afghanistan. This takeover marked a significant turning point in the country's history. The Taliban, once a relatively unknown group, were now in control of a nation. But the Taliban's rule was not without controversy. Their strict interpretation of Islamic law drew criticism from around the world. Still, within the borders of Afghanistan, they had managed to bring a degree of stability, albeit at a severe cost. The Taliban's rise to power was a testament to the chaos and desperation that gripped Afghanistan in the years following the Soviet invasion. Their story is a stark reminder of the power of ideology and the enduring impact of conflict on a nation's trajectory. With the Taliban now in control, a new era in Afghanistan's history began. The governance style of the Taliban was vastly different from any that the nation had seen before, marked by an unyielding and austere interpretation of Sharia law. The Taliban's rule was, and still is, characterized by its strict and often brutal enforcement of their religious and social norms. This strict interpretation of Sharia law had far-reaching implications. It dictated every aspect of Afghani life, from attire and entertainment to the penal system and education. For instance, music, television, and other forms of entertainment were largely banned, while the penal system often saw public executions and amputations for crimes as per their interpretation of Islamic law. One of the most dramatic changes, however, came in the realm of women's rights and education. Under the Taliban, women were stripped of their freedoms, barred from employment, and forced to cover themselves fully in a burqa. Girls' education was heavily restricted, with many schools for girls being shut down. This not only limited their personal growth, but further perpetuated the cycle of poverty and dependency. Yet, while the Taliban reigned supreme within the borders of Afghanistan, their governance style led to international isolation. Many nations, horrified by the human rights abuses and the oppressive rule of the Taliban, cut off diplomatic relations. The United Nations also imposed sanctions, further deepening the country's economic crisis. The Taliban's governance brought a harsh new reality to the people of Afghanistan. Their rigid interpretation of Sharia law and the resulting societal changes marked a stark shift in the nation's trajectory, casting a long shadow over the lives of its people. The world watched in despair as a country rich in culture and history was forced to adapt to a harsh new reality. In 2001, following the tragic events of September 11th, the Taliban's world was about to change forever. The United States, backed by an international coalition, launched a military invasion of Afghanistan. The mission? To dismantle Al-Qaeda and remove the Taliban from power. The initial invasion was swift and seemed decisive. Within 2 months, the Taliban government had fallen and the US forces appeared victorious, but the story didn't end there. The Taliban, seemingly defeated, began to regroup and adapt. They adopted guerrilla warfare tactics, leveraging the rugged terrain of Afghanistan to launch attacks against the US and NATO forces. Despite having superior military technology, the foreign troops found themselves in a quagmire. They were fighting an enemy that was elusive, resilient, and deeply rooted in the local population. The war dragged on for 2 decades, becoming America's longest war. The US and NATO faced numerous challenges, not just on the battlefield but also in trying to establish a stable and functioning government in Afghanistan. The Taliban, meanwhile, continued their insurgency, gaining strength and territory. The challenges were not just military in nature. The cultural, religious, and social complexities of Afghanistan made it even more difficult for the foreign forces to gain a foothold. The war took a heavy toll, not only in terms of casualties, but also in the form of a massive financial drain. Despite the might of the US military, the Taliban proved to be a formidable adversary. After 2 decades of conflict, the seemingly impossible happened. The year 2021 saw the culmination of protracted negotiations between the United States and the Taliban, leading to the signing of a historic peace deal. This agreement, a beacon of hope for war-torn Afghanistan, came with a significant clause, the withdrawal of US troops from Afghan soil. As the last of the American boots lifted off the ground, a void was left behind, a void that was swiftly filled by the Taliban who, in a matter of weeks, overran the country. Their rapid takeover was a stark reminder of their persistent influence and strategic resilience. However, this victory didn't come without consequences. Afghanistan, already reeling under decades of war, plunged into further turmoil. The nation's economy, already on shaky grounds, was pushed to the brink of collapse. The Afghan people faced a stark reality of dwindling resources, mounting unemployment, and a surge in prices. Human rights, particularly those of women and girls, have been a major casualty. The freedoms and liberties that they had painstakingly acquired over the past 2 decades are being rapidly eroded. The international community watches with bated breath as the Taliban promises of a more inclusive and moderate rule. But actions on the ground often tell a different story. Yet, amidst the chaos and uncertainty, there are those who dare to dream. Individuals like Durrani Javed Waziri, a former high-ranking public official who was forced to flee her homeland, hold on to the hope of returning one day to serve their country. They believe in the resilience of the Afghan people, in their ability to rise from the ashes and in their unyielding spirit to survive and thrive. The Taliban's victory marked a new chapter in Afghanistan's turbulent history, but the road ahead is fraught with challenges. As the dust settles, the world watches on, hoping that peace, stability, and progress will finally find their way to this beleaguered nation. We've journeyed through the formation, rise, governance, war, and victory of the Taliban. It's a saga that continues to unfold. Born out of the turmoil of civil war, the Taliban emerged as a force to be reckoned with, swiftly gaining control of Afghanistan. Their governance style was marked by a strict interpretation of Sharia law, affecting every aspect of daily life, especially for women and girls. The war with America was a pivotal chapter, a grueling conflict that lasted 2 decades, leading to profound changes on both sides. The Taliban's recent victory marks a new era, bringing a mix of fear, uncertainty, and a glimmer of hope for some. Throughout these events, the resilience of the Afghan people has been a constant. They've endured unimaginable hardships and continue to strive for a better future. As we continue to watch events unfold in Afghanistan, we are reminded of the complexity of its history and the resilience of its people. Thanks for joining us on this journey through history on Unveil Matrix. Until next time, keep delving into the stories that shape our world.